Raiders training camp is on the move. That plus a whole lot more comes up on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for May 6, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome here, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. Show continues to grow each and every day. That's because of you, Raider Nation, and because of my man Ari. He does a fantastic job each and every day. We definitely appreciate him. You want to hit him up on Twitter, you can. At Ari Producers, you can hit me up as well, at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. Your calls and texts will come up in segment number 3. Got a lot of calls and texts, a lot of feedback over the course of the weekend, so we'll get to as many as possible in segment number 3. Segment number 2, we'll go over the power ranking conversation that we had last week. I had Eric Edholm from NFL.com actually on my radio show throughout the course of the week, kind of explaining the power rankings, the formula, and why the Raiders came in at number 23, even though he feels like that they had a really good offseason. So you'll hear that coming up in segment number 2, plus the 33team.com graded every team in the leagues their draft. We'll go over the Raiders draft class according to the 33team.com. That's all coming up in segment number 2 of today's show. Here in segment number 1, news and notes, whatever I was able to collect over the weekend, and we'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Monopoly Go. And I admit it, I've been admitted a lot of times, I got a competitive side. It's a big fan of Monopoly Go. It's the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. You can join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. So the biggest piece of news that came out over the weekend and had a lot of people texting me and tweeting at me and saying, wait, Q, what's going on? The Raiders training camp is looking like it's going to be leaving the Intermountain Health Performance Center and headed to Costa Mesa. And the city of Costa Mesa actually put out a tweet over the weekend saying the city of Costa Mesa is currently engaged in discussions with the Las Vegas Raiders, who have expressed interest in using the Jack Hammett Sports Complex for their 2024 summer training camp. And then it goes on to say this from the mayor: I'm pleased to welcome the Raiders to the great city of Costa Mesa for training camp this summer. The Raiders and Costa Mesa share a commitment to excellence, and our partnership will greatly benefit the community. So multiple people reached out to the Raiders to try to get a comment, like Vic Tafer and Paul Gutierrez and Vinny Bonsignore, and the Raiders did not respond to the request as of just yet. They've been using their Henderson practice facility as a training camp site since they moved to Las Vegas in 2020. So in Vinny Bonsignore's report that he put out on the RJ, he said the Raiders would pay $165,000 in rent to Costa Mesa as part of the agreement. They also would pay $600,000 for field improvements at the sports complex, hold a team training camp for kids aged 6 to 12, give 100 tickets for local students to attend an NFL game in Southern California, and donate outdoor weight training equipment to Costa Mesa High School. Also donate $10,000 to a local youth sports team. And apparently the practices would be open to the public. So that's kind of cool. But, you know, a lot of folks looked at it and said, wait, hold on. You just got that brand new facility. You can't leave training camp now, you know. But for the majority, I mean, the Raiders used to always have training camp in Napa, so I don't actually think it's a bad idea. It's a little inconvenient, right, for guys like me that are here. That means I'd have to travel to Costa Mesa, which, you know, just be part of the job. But I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's really good to be able to get all the players, get them away from home, get them away from their everyday lives, and be able to all be at one spot, one location, and really kind of team bond, and start building the team in 2024. And, you know, training camp is normally like that anyway. You know, a lot of teams like, the Cowboys, they even go to Southern California. The Saints go to Southern California. The Chargers, obviously, the Rams. So I wouldn't be mad at it at all. I think it's a nice opportunity. The weather's obviously not as bad, or as hot, I should say, there in Costa Mesa as it is here in the Las Vegas Henderson area. I mean, it's blazing hot, so that's why they have to have their practices so early in the morning. But all in all, I just think it's a really good opportunity to team bond. And I think that, you know, Antonio Pierce, this is one of the things I've been talking about. You know, we know what he looked like as an interim coach last year. What is it going to look like under training camp, right, with him? What's practices going to look like? What's the routine going to look like now that he is the full full-time coach. And this could be part of what he's trying to build, and knowing as a player that's won a Super Bowl that this is the opportunities to really start to put that team together and get that bonding by going off campus and going somewhere else to have the training camp. And more teams around the league do that than just stay there at their home facility. So sounds like it's something that is going to happen. It's not set in stone yet. I believe that they have a vote on it coming up on Tuesday. But what it feels like and what it looks like is that the Raiders are going to be moving their training camp to Costa Mesa. So we'll see what happens. There will be a lot of Raider Nation obviously representing in Southern California. I guarantee there'll be a ton of Raider Nation there representing. So that'll be really cool to be able to kind of get back to that, that feel of it again, as it used to be back in the day. And again, it's just a little inconvenience, but I mean, if it's inconvenience, it is what it is, right? I'll deal with that inconvenience. I'm not worried about that. Just to have an opportunity to be there and cover the team and see how it comes together once training camp happens. But again, that'll be something that'll probably be voted on Tuesday. And as soon as we get the official word, I'm sure that's when the Raiders will make an official statement as well. But look for that to be a real deal thing, that training camp will be taking place in Costa Mesa, California. Also, and this is not official either, but I got word on Sunday that the Raiders have signed a free agent wide receiver, Jalen Guyton, formerly of the Chargers. He was the guy who visited the facility about 5-6 days ago, basically a week, basically the same time that Michael Gallup signed with the Silver and Black for the 1 year up to $3 million deal. It looks like that Jalen Guyton is going to be signing, and I don't know when it's going to become official, if it's going to be today, later on today, tomorrow, whatever the case may be, but found out over the weekend that he, in fact, was going to be signing with the Raiders, and he's just a guy that's fast. He's got some wheels, right? He didn't have a ton of production in 2023. Obviously, Tom Telesco knows him really well from his time with the Chargers, but they're trying to put as many players out there as possible to be as competitive as possible for that offense to get cooking. Because, again, we all know that the offense was on the struggle bus in 2023. It's got to be a lot better. So they're trying to put as many pieces out there, as many players out there to make training camp competitive. Right. Again, when they can have a 90-man roster, that's what they're going to do. And I knew that they had a couple open spots, so not surprising at all that Jalen Guyton's going to be added to the mix as well. We know Michael Gallup was added last week. Neither one of the guys are guaranteed to make the roster, but you have to feel pretty good that, at least one of those two dudes will make the 53-man roster and be able to provide a little bit of extra juice to that Raiders offense, whoever the quarterback's going to be, right? Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew is going to have multiple weapons, including the first-round pick, Brock Bowers, out of Georgia. So it's all starting to come together. It's real when you start to see, all these different players get signed, and you start to hear about, rookie minicamp, which will be going on later on this week. Of course, we'll find out the schedule. The official schedule will come out for the Raiders later on, I believe, on Thursday of this week. So it's starting to come together. It's starting to cook. There'll be some OTAs. There'll be mandatory minicamp. Then they'll be off for about a month, and then there'll be training camp. And again, as I mentioned at the top, looks like training camp will be in Costa Mesa, California. So that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. I want to jump into the Raiders and the power rankings according to Eric Edholm, something I talked about on last week's show, had him on my radio show, and just wanted to let you hear his explanation, plus go over what the 33rdteam.com had to say about the Raiders draft class as they graded each and every one of the picks. That's all coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about FanDuel. It's winners take all time in the NBA and NHL. Unfortunately, the Vegas Golden Knights, they lost on Sunday, and so their season is wrapped up. But the NBA, it was some good action on Sunday as well as the Cleveland Cavaliers. They topped Orlando in a Game 7. Game 7s are always a whole lot of fun. Well, FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and a whole lot more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to jump into the power rankings conversation. Again, it's nothing to really get worked up about. It's only May 6th, so it's very early in the calendar year. No games could be won or lost, so it doesn't really matter where you're ranked, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what folks on the outside are thinking of the Raiders and their offseason and what they've been able to do since they went not only through free agency but the draft as well. And so I brought up the article by Eric Edholm that was on NFL.com, had him on my radio show to give an opportunity to kind of explain. He actually said that the Raiders had a really good offseason, but then dropped them down from 22 to 23. And so I just kind of wanted to get a little bit of explanation on what was, going into his thoughts, what made him drop the Raiders down a little bit. So off top, here's Eric Edholm just talking about the power rankings formula, like how he comes up with these power rankings.
Yeah, so I finished my last version of the regular season power rankings right after the Super Bowl, put a bow on the 23 season, and then, kind of rearranged it as we got to the off season and the first wave of free agency. So I did a previous version before, and, Bengals were back up because Joe Burrow's, on his way back, and yet there's this Higgins situation. And, so you have to kind of treat it like a sliding scale, right? And if teams do well, I mean, I bumped up the Falcons post free agency after getting Cousins and everything, and then I moved them back down, or a couple other teams passed them, because I felt like, there was at least maybe a missed opportunity. I didn't even hate the Michael Penix thing, but let's face it wasn't an immediate contributor right there. So it's tough. I've heard from a lot of fan bases that feel like I'm overrating certain teams and underrating others, and you just try to be as fair as possible.
So there you go. That's the formula that goes into putting the power rankings together. So then, of course, the big question is, all right, well, had a really good offseason, according to Eric, right? But then the Raiders got dropped down one spot. So you hear me ask the question, and you'll hear Eric's response about dropping the Raiders to 23 and what he overall thinks about them. We even get in a little bit of conversation about Antonio Pierce. Check it out.
It's funny, Eric, you're pretty complimentary to him, I thought, in your piece, where you thought that they got better, but they dropped one spot. They went from 22 to 23. How did that happen?
I'm a cruel guy. I like to inflict pain at random, unexpected times, right? You butter somebody up, that's when you stick the knife in, right?
There you go.
Expecting it. Yeah, so a little stealth here, a little cloak and dagger. But, no, honestly, I think it was probably a function of I didn't intend to move them down. It wasn't like, got to move the Raiders down after their pretty solid draft,
Yeah.
So it just kind of worked out that way, that I think I brought someone below them ahead and sort of shifted everybody down. Did they make a major franchise shifting move? Possibly with Bowers. I think he's really, really good. I mean, it's almost like, he was the big mystery man leading up to the draft, and he goes to the Raiders. Everybody goes, oh, okay. All right. Next story, right? It's like,
right.
Wait a minute, hold on. You were fascinated by him before. I am too, right? For good reason. I mean, we saw what Sam Laporta did last year. We saw what Dalton Kincaid did last year. You can't tell me that. I would be shocked if Bowers doesn't come close to that kind of production if he's featured in that way, right? So maybe he's a tremendous value at 13, and the quarterback thing just wasn't meant to be this year. So obviously improved defense. You still have weapons that they can get the ball to. No Josh, but can they forge a run the game together and play good D? I mean, that's really going to be crucial for them to win those key games at Arrowhead and places like that.
What did you think about just Antonio Pierce, what he was able to do as the interim coach? Now he's the full-time coach, but really changing the culture of who the Raiders were to who they are right now.
Yeah, I've always kind of followed his career. I mean, I covered the NFC East for a long time when he was in his Giants heyday, and he was such a I got him on the phone a few times, the player, and he kind of talked like a coach. He's all business, but you also can hear that little player kind of sympathy in his voice too. He's been there. He's been through the wars, and he wasn't the most insanely talented player. Yes, a very big guy, but he made his way to the top, and I think he wants players like that on his roster. So, I was excited for him to get the chance. I know the Arizona State thing where he was, a big part of it kind of went sideways there. I'm glad he's gotten an opportunity now, and yeah, he kind of righted the ship there. It wasn't playoffs, but it was good. It was better. It felt more like the locker room environment that a successful team would have, right? Things just, even when they won games with Josh McDaniels, things just didn't seem comfortable or right. So that part of it is huge. Do they have the quarterback in the room this year? Do they have some kind of spark that can help? Obviously the defense is going to be, that front is going to be a pain to deal with. But is there one more defensive player in the back seven who can really kind of step up and bring this whole thing together?
So more of what teams around the Raiders did as opposed to what the Raiders did to drop. They didn't do anything to drop them down one spot. It was more about the other teams around them. And I had a lot of people hitting me up and say, "Oh, that's disrespectful. There's not 22 teams that are better than the Raiders." Well, look, 14 teams made the playoffs last year. right? And then the Raiders were the 11th seed in the AFC. So you can even say a couple more teams. So I had a couple people hit me up. I was like, well, the Raiders should be around 18 or 19 or 20. Okay, that's cool, right? I mean, that's fair, right? If you think that they should be around 18, 19, 20 as opposed to 23, that's cool. It just gives them more reason to be motivated, right? I mean, Antonio Pierce always says that they have to go out there and earn the respect anyway. You don't have to like them, but you're going to respect them, and they're going to earn that. I mean, these are small, minor things. It's not going to be something that's going to be like bulletin board material. Oh, this guy said that, we're the 23rd best team. Like, they're not going to worry about that. But it just kind of let them know, hey, this is where the outside world is thinking about you as of right now. And you go out there and you do what you do. And obviously you put together the team during training camp. And then when the regular season comes, you win a lot of games, and your power ranking is going to go up. It's just that simple, but you got to go out there and win the games. I also wanted to share with you 33rdteam.com. I like to reference them quite a bit. Ari Mayrow is a good friend. He's on my radio show all the time, and they graded every single pick for every team. So I just want to go over the Raiders really quick. Brock Bowers, tight end out Georgia, they gave him an A-, right? And I don't even know why it wouldn't be an A+, but I mean, A-, that's cool, right? That's a great grade right there. He's a great player. He's going to add some juice to this Raiders offense, which obviously the Raiders offense needs some juice. Their second round pick, Jackson Powers Johnson, he's probably a guy that most people, that's probably their favorite player in the draft. And he's one of my favorites that the Raiders drafted just because I think he's going to bring a lot of nasty to that Raiders offensive line. He's going to do some really good things. I think him being a center, and obviously he was announced as a guard, but him having that center ability is going to be big as well for this Raiders and their offensive line. So back-to-back A's. Got an A- with Brock Bowers, an A with Jackson Powers Johnson. Delmar Glaze, I was actually kind of surprised by this one. He's a third-round pick out of Maryland. They gave him a B+. They gave him a B+ for that pick, and the reason I was kind of surprised is because a lot of folks are talking about Delmar, DJ, whatever you want to call him, is a reach. And, you could look at it as maybe it was a little bit of a reach. He probably should have been maybe a fourth-round pick, fifth-round pick, but they gave him a B+. So clearly they saw something in him that they like as well. And there's been multiple people that I've talked to on my radio show about some of these draft picks, and a lot of them do like Delmar Glaze. A lot of them say that, this guy, he's got a little something that he's going to be able to bring to this Raiders offensive line. Still don't know what position he's going to play. I just know that he is willing to play wherever. Left tackle, right tackle. Maybe he ends up being a swing tackle. Maybe he ends up being the solidified right tackle. He'll be in a competition with Thayer Munford as well. But I thought that was pretty cool that they gave him a B+. Again, 33rdteam.com for Delmar Glaze, a third-round pick out of Maryland. DeCamerion Richardson, the cornerback out of Mississippi State, round 4 pick. They gave him a B-. Not so bad, right? Again, A-, A, B+, and B-. Pretty good so far, right? I mean, 4 up, 4 down. If you can get 4 players, and I think that the first 2 are clearly starters, right? And Delmar will have to prove that he could be a starter, but even Richardson, right? I know that he's kind of raw. I know that he's just got the size and speed, which is great, but the competition's out there. He's going to be a guy that's going to be able to go out there and compete and try to solidify that cornerback room, but a B- is not too bad at all. Round 5, I was actually surprised by this one because I thought it was going to be a little bit higher. Tommy Eichenberg, the linebacker at Ohio State, they gave him a C+. And I know that he's got some limitations here and there. He's not necessarily a guy that could be out there for all 3 downs. He's a guy that's really going to start out and really cut his teeth with the special teams unit, which is fine, right? That's how a lot of guys get onto the field, right? He's kind of Robert Spillane-ish. I think he's going to have an opportunity to learn from Spillane, and that's going to be a good thing. But he's one of my favorite picks as well. Tommy Eichenberg, he's just a tackling machine, a little bit of a liability in coverage. But that's what we said last year about Robert Spillane, and it worked out okay. So Tommy Eichenberg got a C+ from the 33rdteam.com as they rated and graded every draft pick for the Silver and Black and every draft pick for every team across the National Football League. In round 6, the running back out of New Hampshire, Dylan Laube, they gave him a B, a solid B for that one. And I've been hearing a lot of really good reviews about him. A guy who's going to get on the field by special teams. Tom Telesco said that right after they drafted him. He's going to get on the field with special teams immediately. But with the new kickoff rule, and there's been a few people that actually have called in and talked about it here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, he could end up being a factor in that area and that aspect as well. He did some really good kickoff returns there at New Hampshire, so he can do that. He's also a guy that's expected to catch a bunch of passes out of the backfield for the Raiders offense. So I think that this guy is going to be we've been talked about it a couple times, kind of the Danny Woodhead / Austin Eckler type. I think he's probably a little bit closer to Danny Woodhead, but just a guy that could be used in multiple fashions. He's been getting a lot of good reviews, in the 33rdteam.com gave him a B for their grade. A 6th-round pick, getting a B, not too bad. And then Trey Taylor, the safety out of Air Force, a young man that's related to Ed Reed, got a solid B for him as well. Again, he was picked in the 7th round, their first 7th-round pick. They gave him a B, right? He's a guy that has a way to get to the ball. That's the most important thing. You want to have a guy on that back end that can go make plays, take the ball away, give it back to your offense. That's what Trey Taylor is able to do. And, listening to him talk following the draft and just what he has to say, he's talking about going out there and trying to compete for a starting role, right? And if a guy in the 7th round could go and compete for a starting job, that's awesome, right? And that's the expectation he's supposed to have, right? I'm going to go out there and compete to be a starter. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter, but just to have that kind of mentality that you know what kind of player you're getting on the team. So they gave him a B. And then the final pick for the Raiders draft, MJ Jevenshire, the cornerback out of Pittsburgh, round 7, they gave him a C-. So that was their lowest grade that the Raiders received from the 33rd team all draft long, was a C-, and that was their second 7th-round pick, which we all know. If you're a 7th-round pick, a 6th-round pick, you got to work your tail off just to make the roster. If the lowest player drafted got a C- from 33rdteam.com, I think that's pretty good. I would say, Tom Telesco, well done for your first draft with the silver and black. And we went over it. We've obviously continued to, to talk about the players and highlight the players and get a little bit more in depth about, what they're bringing to the table. But to know that the lowest grade that the Raiders got in the draft, and again, this is just one outlet's, opinions, but I do respect what they've got going on at the 33rdteam.com because they do have, former coaches, former scouts, right, a lot of different NFL insiders and sharp minds that work for them. Hell, Rich Gannon is a part of 33rdteam.com. There's a lot of really good football minds that work for that website. So that's why it's one that I reference and have Ari Meirov in particular on my radio show quite a bit just to talk about NFL news and notes. So there you go. A-, A, B+, B-, C+, B, B, C- for the Raiders and their 2024 draft class. Again, Tom Telesco, I think, job well done. Now, these guys obviously got to go out there and prove it once they can get going. Again, rookie minicamp will start at the end of the week on the 10th. And so, that'll be the first opportunity to, just kind of see what they're and hear what they're made of. And hopefully we get an opportunity to catch up with those players. But that's what I got for you for segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Just kind of going over, the power rankings and also what the 33rdteam.com, what they have for the Raiders as far as their draft class and the grades. Coming up, segment number 3, your calls and text draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. We'll do it next. Before we get to that, though, I got to, call a pause. I got to say pause for the cause, right? We got to talk about Monopoly Go. And I know exactly what you're saying. Q, you did it at the top of the show. I know. I already talked about it, but there's so much good stuff in this game that I just got to continue to talk about it. And more times than not, I find myself talking about this game over the weekend. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments. You work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win, the more awesome prizes you can unlock. And there's so much that you can get. But the one I have a lot of fun with is the hilarious emojis that you could use just to kind of basically talk trash to your friends. And that's what I like to do. Even though my guy Vegas, Jess, keeps telling me, wait a minute, dude, why you continue to try to smash my buildings and steal my vault full of money? All right, I'll let you go. I won't do that this time. But, yeah, so, again, more times than not, I end up talking about Monopoly Go over the weekends with my friends. It feels new, exciting every day. They have constantly changing tournaments and challenges, a ton, including their own unique mini games. You could dig for treasures. You can just do a whole lot of different options, right? There's something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. Get off the bench. Go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and text draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with John in Brentwood. He's a new booty caller, chiming in about the draft and in particular Brock Bowers. Here he is, John in Brentwood.
Hey, Q. This is John in Brentwood. I've been loving your show and listening to it for a long time, so it's the first time I'm calling. But I wanted to comment on the draft this year with Brock Bowers. I think many of the callers have maybe alluded to this, or some people may have alluded to this, but one of the things I wanted to mention is if you take a look at the two teams that were in the Super Bowl this year, the Niners with Kittle and the Chiefs with Kelsey, both teams had elite tight ends, and from everything that I'm hearing, Brock Bowers is going to be that type of player. Time will tell, but I think it means a lot to the Raiders organization, and I want to give them some props on the draft itself. And then you take a look at the teams that were in the Super Bowl. They both had elite tight ends, and I think this guy's going to turn out to be one of those as well. As soon as we get our quarterback, will be right up there with those two teams.
John, so thanks so much for the call, my man. And yeah, I think Brock Bowers is going to be really good, right? I think that everyone knows he has the potential of being really good. Luke Getsy has got to find a way to get the most out of him, right? I mean, he could be used as a weapon. He could be used all over the field, but it's going to be up to the OC, Luke Getsy, to really unleash what he could do. I'm excited about the options, right? Especially with Bowers and Mayer. That's a nice 1-2 punch. You've got Devontae, you've got Jacoby, right? You've got so many different options offensively. You got to find a way to get on the ball and make the most out of what his ability is. So that'll be the challenge for Luke Getsy, but I think it's a challenge that he'll definitely be up for, and look to see those guys on the field quite a bit together, Michael Mayer and also Brock Bowers. Thanks so much for that call, my man. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Ohio Raider from the 419. Says, Q, I'm not surprised where they got the Raiders listed in the power rankings. It never fails. It is always the Raiders' hate. But you know this is a good thing because I'm sure AP and this team will be ready. And the Chargers at 15 miss me with that. Sometimes you just have to go out and take your respect. Ohio Raider from the 419. Thanks so much for the text. And that has to do with the article I was talking about. And you heard Eric Edholm from NFL.com kind of explain himself when it came to the Raiders at 23. He just put the Chargers at 15 because of the Jim Harbaugh effect. And, I mean, you knew that Jim Harbaugh is going to get that love. They've been praising him ever since he won at Michigan, right? I mean, every year it's like, is Jim Harbaugh coming back? Is he coming back? You knew he was going to get that love. So, you know, you're right. Antonio Pierce and company just going to have to go out there and take the respect. And I'm sure that they'll be ready for that challenge. I'm sure they're up for that challenge, and they look forward to that challenge. So, yeah, again, it's nothing to get too worked up about. It's May 6th. You know, no games are being won or lost right now. So it's just, you know, fun conversation at this point of the year. But thanks so much for the text, my man. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider Big C in L.A., calling to talk about training camp and the possibility of them going to Costa Mesa. Here he is, Raider Big C.
Hey, Q, it's Raider Big C from L.A. It's Saturday, trying to find something to do, watching baseball, watching the NBA playoffs. But I come across something while reading the local news here. And the city of Costa Mesa, and just to give you a little region, that's in Orange County, so it's a little south of LA. I'm pretty sure you know, but for other listeners that are listening on this, it's maybe 30 minutes away from LA in Orange County. The Chargers used to be the training camp there since 2017. But according to this article from the city of Costa Mesa News, there's a discussion of the Raiders having a training camp out here. I'll tell you this, if they come out here, I'm more excited. And I think AP saying, like, I can't be handling those summer heat anymore. So that means if they do come to Costa Mesa, Q, will you be coming out too? Because I know you've always been the one that's, you know, nonstop with those training camps. So let me know if you heard anything about it. You know, a little insider, you know. Looks like the city council is going to discuss it on Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday. It'll be a 1-year agreement. I mean, that'd be amazing. And I know exactly where it's at. Not that far from where I live, and I can just imagine Raider Nation be able to show up and actually have a true training camp again, like back in the old Napa days. I know it's cool we had it at Raiders HQ, but, you know, it's only limited to how many people can show up, and now let the nation enjoy it. So let me know what you think. Raiders, Costa Mesa, California, training camp. Beautiful weather. Raider Big C, out.
Thank you for the call, my man. And, yeah, it looks like this is happening, right? I mean, it's got to still be voted on. Like I mentioned, that should happen on Tuesday, and the Raiders haven't officially made a statement about it yet, but it does appear to be trending in that direction. So it'll be good to see Raider Nation out there representing, right? And it'll be nice for them to get away, I think, from from campus and be able to do training camp in a cooler environment. And again, just kind of get away from the city, get away from their house, get away from everything going on with the family, and just being able to focus in on training camp like in football like they used to do. So I'm okay with that. I think that it's it'll be a good opportunity for them, and obviously that'll lead into the first preseason game. So they'll do that up until it's time for them to get to preseason. Then they'll get back to the Intermountain Health Performance Center. And, yeah, that means most likely I'll be headed that way as well, which is fine, right? That's again, if that's the biggest inconvenience from it, we can live with that. There's no doubt. But Raiders Big C, thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Got a text from Raider Mitch. He said, what's good, Q? Raider Mitch out the 513, just wondering if you got any of my couple messages I sent on X a week ago. My 3 favorites from the draft are Bowers, Powers Johnson, and Trey Taylor. Raider Nation for life. That's from Raider Mitch. And Mitch, I probably did. I get a lot of messages sometimes, and so if I don't respond, I apologize. I get a lot of texts, I get a lot of calls, I get a lot of tweets. So I try to get back to as many people as possible. But as far as your 3 favorite players for the draft, I think those are all really good players. right? Brock Bowers, the first-round pick. Jackson Powers-Johnson, the second-round offensive lineman, and Trey Taylor, the seventh-round pick, the safety out of Air Force, right? Guys that we talked about in segment number 2. So thanks so much for that text, my man. I appreciate you. And like I said, man, if I don't respond to it, don't take it personal. I just get a lot of feedback all the time, and so I'm not able to get to every one of them. So thanks so much again. I do appreciate you. Let's get one more call in. This one's from OKC Outlaw, calling to talk about an elite quarterback versus an elite defense. Here he is, OKC Outlaw.
Q, what's up? OKC Outlaw, long-time listener, man. Love what you do. Hey, I was listening to your take about needing that elite quarterback to put you over the top in the playoffs, right? Your team could make the playoffs. Maybe you don't run deep in the playoffs because you don't have that elite quarterback. Well, last year, if you think about it, it was an elite defense that won the Super Bowl for the Chiefs. You can make a case for keeping Mahomes afloat. So, and I'm not saying Mahomes is not a great player. Obviously, he's a great player. But you got to have that dude down by 2 scores late in the game because you know he's going to pull something out of his ass. You can beat that out if you need to. Anyway, thinking about that, man. Big fan of what you do. Keep rocking. OKC Outlaw. Out.
Thanks so much for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And yeah, I mean, I agree. The defense, you talk about Kansas City, that's what got them where they needed to go, right? I mean, it wasn't the offense all season long. We talked about the offense and talked about the lack of weapons, but they had an elite defense. You're right. And at the end of the day, though, in the Super Bowl, that defense stood up in a major way, but also that elite quarterback stepped up in a major way as well. Patrick Mahomes got it done when he needed to get it done and was a difference maker. And I just think at some point, and it's obviously not right now, Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew are going to be the quarterbacks in 2024. I think at some point you've got to have, an elite quarterback or close to an elite quarterback, right? A guy that you feel like if everything breaks down and goes bad, he could put the team on his back and win some games, right? For the Raiders, in my opinion, to win games right now, the defense has to be clicking and things have to go right? It can't be like a off day. If it's an off day, they're probably not going to win that game. I mean, it's just that simple. I don't think they have the quarterback that could put the team on their back. At some point, they need to have that guy. But it's not going to be this year, and that's fine. But both quarterbacks that they have proven that they can win games, and that's all you want. You want guys that can win games. You want a defense. You basically have to play, a complete team game, which is what you're supposed to do anyway. But sometimes it doesn't always play out that way, as you very well know. But thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. That's all I got time for on today's show. Got a text from Guareb we'll get to tomorrow. Also, diehard Raider fan calling from Mexico. We'll get that on tomorrow as well. We'll have plenty more feedback. We'll have more news and notes. Maybe we'll get a little bit more of an update about Costa Mesa, and we'll have plenty of conversation as well as we continue to power through another week here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.